I mentioned earlier this morning, one of our co-chairmen, Judge Raymond Aberson, a multi-generation Delta family from Holly Grove. Our other co-chairman, also multi-generation Delta family, Ritter Arnold, a fourth-generation family member. He's the executive vice president of E. Ritter and Company, which many of you are familiar with. He has worked in his family business for 35 years. He's held a number of leadership positions across the Delta, everything from the Arkansas Boll Weevil Eradication Foundation to the Crittenden Regional Hospital to Methodist Family Health to East Arkansas Boy Scout Council to the Arkansas Agricultural Council. I could go on and on. Serves on the boards of the Arkansas Children's Hospital Foundation, Arkansas Research Alliance, Arkansas chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Deep, deep roots in the Arkansas Delta, and it's time to talk agriculture. He'll introduce our other panel members, so please welcome our co-chairman of this conference and our moderator for this panel, Ritter Arnold. Ritter?
All right, we're going to get everybody re-energized after that wonderful lunch. If you enjoyed the catfish at lunch, stand up. Stand up. All right, so, you may sit back down. Now, I think y'all are almost there. If you have an account with Simmons Bank, stand up.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Simmons Bank for putting on this seminar. We hope it's just the first of several to come. I'd like to introduce our panelists this afternoon. First, we have with us Matt King from Arkansas Farm Bureau. Matt is Farm Bureau's Director of Market Information and Economics, and he's a last-minute fill-in for Randy Veach, who could not be here today. So, Matt, we appreciate you. Freddie Black, down at the end of the table. Freddie is a producer and the state market chairman of Simmons Bank. Freddie is from Lake Village. He's a graduate of the University of Arkansas and farms in Chico and Desha counties with the R.A. Pickens and Sons partnership. I've also heard that he's an avid turkey hunter. Andrew Grobmyer. Andrew is the Executive Vice President of the Arkansas Agricultural Council, which advocates for Arkansas agriculture. Andrew is a graduate of SMU and has previously served with Senator Mark Pryor and 1st District Congressman Marion Barry. And then Cynthia Edwards. Cynthia is our Deputy Secretary of Agriculture for the Arkansas Agriculture Department. She is a native of DeWitt, has her law degree from UALR Law School of Law and her Master's of Law in Agriculture from the University of Arkansas Law School. She previously worked in Washington with Senators Bumpers and Lincoln between 1987 and 2011. So welcome, panelists. We've talked a lot today about change in the Arkansas Delta. Life has just been continuous change. And using the year 1800 as our starting point, a lot has changed. At that very first time, one way to make a living was to trap, hunt, fish, and trade with the Native American Indian population. That came and went pretty quickly. Following that, the timber industry got its start. I think all of us are familiar that eastern Arkansas used to be one giant hardwood timber stand, but the timber industry came and then it eventually left. Row crop agriculture came and stayed. By the Civil War, the South was producing 75% of the world's cotton, and the demand for raw cotton at that time was insatiable. During the Civil War in Arkansas, as elsewhere, plantations were dismantled and slaves were emancipated. Rolling forward to the year to the 1900s, The first rice was planted on the Grand Prairie. Sharecropping and tenant farming emerged as agricultural production systems. And an interesting phenomena that emerged even back in roughly 1920, the populations of Monroe, Prairie, and Lee counties peaked. In 1930, Arkansas planted 3.5 million acres of cotton. Cotton was planted in all of Arkansas's counties that year but 5. And shortly thereafter, the mechanization of agriculture started. I think the tractor was the first agricultural machine that showed up. And a tractor at that time was capable of replacing the labor of between 5 and 6 tenant families. In the next decade following the introduction of the tractor, the population of 10 more eastern Arkansas Delta counties peaked. Then the last half of the 20th century, that was when some people referred to it as the Great Migration started. Tenant farmers started moving from the farm to town, and then from town to the industrial north. The cotton picker was developed. Some of you here in Pine Bluff may be familiar with the name of J.D. Rust. He was the inventor of one of the early cotton pickers. He moved here to Pine Bluff and contracted with the Ben Pearson Manufacturing Company to produce mechanical pickers. During 1950, the population of Phillips, Poinsett, and St. Francis counties peaked. And so since that time, we have seen agriculture continue to change and evolve. Since the turn of the century, Arkansas is now producing about 1.5 million acres of rice annually, roughly 3.5 million acres of soybeans. Cotton, which was being produced at the rate of about 1.5 million acres around the year 2000, has fallen off to under 500,000. And farm equipment, as we all know, has continued to become much more efficient. A 6-row round bale picker at this time now has the capacity to replace 600 hand harvesters. And as a sign of the changing times, Craighead, Greene, and Lonoke counties have become centers of retail, medical, and industrial activity and are growing significantly. So panelists, for the first 150 years, the Delta was joined at the hip with agriculture. As went agriculture, so went the Delta. So Freddie, I'd like to pitch the first question to you. What are some of the most significant changes you've seen on the farm in South Arkansas during your career?
Thank you, Dylan. I stopped at the farm on the way up here today, and I talked to my son, who's now back farming, and I asked him, I said, what's the biggest challenge we face on the farm today? And he said, for me, it's finding a wife to move to southeast Arkansas.
There's a dating service again.
But he just sent me, did a Snapchat, if anybody y'all are familiar with Snapchatting, and he was driving a 966 International tractor that belonged to my father, who quit farming in 1981. And he said, a throwback to simpler times. And I guess mechanization, the equipment we're using today, is one of the greatest changes that's really impacted the way we farm. We're covering a lot more acres. Of course, there's a lot more capital involved in owning that kind of equipment, but that's impacted labor. It's just changed the way we do business. And combines costing $400,000, or the cotton picker you're talking about over $600,000. You can't farm 600 or 700 acres and own today's equipment. And hand in hand with that is the technology involved in operating that equipment, which changes completely the kind of person you put on a tractor or a combine or a sprayer or fertilizer applicator. So technology and equipment, I think, are two really big changes that have impacted the way we do business. Another part of change that we've all witnessed in our lifetime that's let us survive is irrigation and the varieties we're planting today. The yields that we're able to enjoy help us at lower prices. And we never When I was growing up, if somebody made 40 bushels of soybeans, it was, time to celebrate. Now that's a crop failure. But, we didn't have the irrigation we did now. If you've got a farm and you can't irrigate it, it's hard to find somebody to plant anything on it other than maybe hay or weeds. So the landscape has changed with irrigation and certainly with technology as it relates to equipment and our varieties.
What have all these changes that you've seen done to life in the Delta? How have you seen it change the towns in Chico, DeShay County?
Well, it's your job, of course. Is we raised Tommy Jarrett's in the audience. He works with me. We're talking about how is our local country club going to survive. In the 80s and 90s, we had 250 members. Now it's 140, and it's just a matter of numbers of people farming in the Delta. Where a 1,000-acre farm was a nice-sized farm, and you had a good middle-class income, that farm it doesn't exist today, and so that's changed it. The country club is just an example of the impact in a small town that you can't support a lot of the things you used to. One more thing that people don't realize, I always think about money coming into the Delta, and I always observe when it leaves. And all of the providers of our farming inputs now are mostly owned by private equity companies in New York or wherever, whether it's CPS or Greenpoint or Sanders. Those companies are making money on Arkansas farmers, but the profits don't get reinvested here. They leave the state. Years ago, everybody had a little farmers co-op. The farmers were all part of it. Any profits that were made were plowed back in the community in one way or another, or reinvested in equipment for the next year. And so we're seeing an exodus of money, of profits that are made at the expense of the farmer that used to be here that are not anymore. So,
Andrew, let's talk about how things have changed just in the last couple of years. You work with row crop producers all up and down the Mississippi River Delta from Missouri down to Louisiana. What changes are you seeing today in row crop agriculture?
Well, I want to first thank Simmons Bank and Ritter and Judge Abramson for bringing this group together, and as the Executive Vice President of the Agricultural Council of Arkansas, I think we're pleased to be a part of this, and pleased to know, as Rex mentioned earlier, that this kind of spawned from a meeting that we had in Marianna last year, and I think it's an important discussion to have across the board regarding the Delta. But to answer your question about the changes that I've seen, I've been involved in agriculture policy, I guess, for about 13 years, so I've seen a fair amount of change, but it's all occurred in the 21st century, and I think that it's happening faster and faster and faster, these changes as they come, and it's happening all around the world, and the United States and the Delta at large is going to, its survivability in agriculture and economically otherwise is going to depend on the availability of technology. We're seeing technology drive everything, and we're experiencing quite an evolution there, and what I see going forward is a lot more as we see satellite technology come about, wireless technology come about, broadband, the cloud, the Internet of Things that's happening. It's quite amazing, and to be able to communicate all that through social media and things like that is quite amazing, and it's all happening at as I said, a velocity that's almost hard to imagine and wrap your head around. But going forward, I think it's going to be a whole lot more automated, which has happened over the years, but again, it's at an accelerated pace. And I think the Delta, I think Arkansas farmers and Arkansas ag businesses have a great opportunity in capturing the benefits that come from that, from technology development, business development, to the productivity advancements that come with that, and the profitability that is a result of that. So really, it's just an exciting time, I think, but one that also brings a lot of anxiety and reluctancy, I guess, of change. But if we do not change, then there's going to be a point at which we fall behind.
Cynthia, of all of the panelists, you may have the most unique perspective from a statewide level. What changes is the Arkansas Department of Agriculture seeing with a very broad brush across the Delta?
Well, first, let me thank Simmons and all involved, too. This is a great event, and the Arkansas Agriculture Department really appreciates the opportunity to talk about agriculture because it is our #1 agency industry in the state and is so important to our economy. And I also bring best regards and regrets from Secretary Ward. He would have loved to have been here today, but ironically, he's actually on another Delta, at another Delta meeting as we speak, and so Governor Hutchinson put him on the DRA, Delta Regional Authority leadership team. And so he's at an event there, otherwise he would be here too. But as far as statewide and just the changes we've seen, Freddie and Andrea have really touched on the technology change, which is a huge piece of it. And I won't go into those details they did, but I think the exciting part of that is other than just the avenues it opens up for us, I think it does make agriculture a more exciting career for younger people. I think it does bring younger people to the industry, and that's something we desperately need. You know, the average age of farmers right now is 58, and they're just people aren't going to keep farming at that age very much longer if they don't have to. And we do need younger people coming in. I do think the technology does make that an attractive field for them, and it does bring so much in the ways of our natural resource protection. And I was talking to a farmer that is doing a lot with water conservation, and he said, you know, I wish we could have done this 10 or 20 years ago, but we didn't have the technology to make it feasible. But it really is making an impact on the conservation of our natural resources that we all have to continue to make this a great place to live. Another change we're seeing out there is that traditionally we had a pretty decent sized specialty crop industry in kind of the Arkansas River Valley and some in northwest Arkansas as well. But we're starting to see more specialty crop production in the Delta. And that's a big change, and it can be a hard change because it does bring its own set of challenges to bring those different crops in the middle of row crop country. But we are seeing farmers who have a smaller acreage who are able to make a pretty good living with those specialty crops, fruits and vegetables in particular. And we get calls at the Ag Department on a fairly regular basis from large companies on either coast looking for specialty crop growers in our part of the state. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons for that is our natural resources, but we take a group of specialty crop producers to a produce marketing show every year. It's an international show, and there are countries all over the world represented there. And I had on an Arkansas grown shirt, and I was walking through the convention center at the trade show, and this guy ran up to me and grabbed my arm and said, "Where is the Arkansas booth? I've got to get growers from Arkansas because y'all have water." And he was working with folks in California and Texas and who had going through these terrible droughts. And he said, "Y'all have got the resources out there, and we need to tap into that and get your growers growing what we need." And that was my first year at the department. That was 5 years ago, and we have seen a steady increase of those kind of calls that we get in the department. I know we've had some aquaculture producers who had changed their ponds over to specialty crop production. They've had very good success on it. So that's something we may see more of. I know organic production is growing too, and that's something I really never thought we'd see that much of here, but some of these specialty crop growers are realizing that the demand is out there. We have a sweet potato producer in Arkansas. It's one of the largest sweet potato farms in Arkansas and also in the south. But the demand for organic sweet potato that they were getting was just constant. They just weren't growing them. So they've actually partnered with a grower this year in around Augusta, near White County, and they are growing organic sweet potatoes and are putting in a small processing facility over there just to wash, not to further process them, but just to bag them and store them there. And that's going to bring jobs to that area, and that's a big change. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of potential in agriculture, and the Delta is certainly a good place to capture that.
Matt, let's drop back just a little bit and talk about the decade, say that started in 2003, 2004. The decade following that year that year was really a great year for a lot of producers in Arkansas. What was going on back then? What made that such a good decade for Arkansas agriculture?
We've seen a big boom in Arkansas agriculture over the last few years, and it really started back as you had some droughts in the Midwest and others that boosted commodity prices, and it gave Arkansas an opportunity to showcase, like what Cynthia and others have talked about, our ability to grow whatever. Because in the past, Arkansas, you talked about 1.5 million acres of cotton. Well, the cotton prices did not respond like some of the other crops did, and we've seen a lot of producers switch out here in the state of Arkansas and start growing things like corn and soybeans. Corn is a great crop for us here in Arkansas just because of the irrigation, the efficiency that we have to produce it. But also our producers here are very unique from some of the counterparts around the United States in that we have two markets for it. We have the poultry market that's growing in northeast Arkansas. The PICO has put in a new facility up there. They're going to start demanding a lot of corn from that area. But then you've got Tyson Foods, that the facility here in Pine Bluff used to have a lot of rail facility. Now that's fed 100% by Arkansas corn growers. And you've got other areas in the River Valley where most of that corn is fed by Arkansas producers, and that offers a huge premium for growers, and it's caused more infrastructure investment. Instead of farmers delivering everything at harvest, they now build the bins and things like that. They've got 190 million bushels worth of storage is what the USDA estimates is here in the state of Arkansas, and that helps producers manage their crops. It's another tool in the tool belt to make sure that whenever it comes time to harvest, we don't have to rely on the elevators. We don't have to wait in the long lines. We can take it to our own facilities. They're drying it, handling it themselves, and it just gives a lot more market opportunities, allows them to take advantage of some different markets. Agriculture here in the state of Arkansas is about a $20 billion plus industry. About $5 billion worth of that or $10 billion worth of that's actual products. The other $10 billion would be some of the value added, the other induced effects and things like that of agriculture. But of that $10 billion, half of that is raised here in the Delta with row crops, poultry production, other livestock, and forest products. And if you look at the Delta as a whole, 94% of the land area here in the Delta is some type of agriculture, whether that's forestry or livestock and cropland. So it's the basis of what the economy is here in the Delta, in the manufacturing sector for all these different agricultural products, whether it be meat processing, timber industry, the rice mill. $550 million worth of salaries from that industry here in the Delta. So it's a huge part. And one of the benefits the Delta has by having agriculture is one of the bases is an agriculture industry. It's a more steady industry. You don't have the booms and busts in agriculture typically that you have across the rest of the industry. But as technologies and things like that the other panelists have discussed, it's changed the needs of farmers out there from a career standpoint, to where folks are no longer going out looking for manual labor or hand labor. They're looking for more sophisticated labor. And the farmers, everything the farmers sell just about is assessed a checkoff, which is a self-imposed tax on the growers put on themselves to reinvest in their industry. And one of the things the Soybean Board here in Arkansas started doing this year is provided a grant to the Future Farmers of America high school chapter, so they can start going out and purchasing some of this equipment at different high schools to help train those folks that may not be going to college but wanting to stay in their local town, so they can have a skill set, so they can come out and run a tractor that runs on GPS. They can handle the computers and things like that agriculture is. Agriculture is no longer mom and pop with the pitchfork, the old image that we all have of agriculture. That's not agriculture today. It's a very sophisticated industry where a lot of farmers, they look at themselves probably first as an engineer. They have to figure out how to fix something on the farm. Next, they may be an agronomist trying to figure out which chemicals or fertilizers, things like that we need to put on our crop. And then a marketer. There's very little time left out there to actually be a farmer anymore, of what most people think of as a farmer. There's all these different careers that a farmer has to be.
Cynthia and Matt, I'd like for both of you to respond to this next question. Exports are a big deal in Arkansas agriculture. We export 15%, nationally we export 15% of our corn, 40% of our soybeans and wheat, 50% of our rice, and 80% of our cotton. So where would we be without exports, and what's it going to take to support those going forward?
Exports are a huge part of what the farmers do. If you think about it, for our soybean crop, about 1 out of every 3 rows of soybeans that are grown here in Arkansas on average would be destined to go to China. Just think about that, and basically every other row of cotton that's produced here is going to end up in China eventually. So I mean, we're no longer based on this economy of just what's going on here locally. It's now a global economy for agriculture, and what happens in Brazil, Europe, China, those really impact what the prices are going to be for the farmers here. We've done, as Arkansas Farm Bureau and the promotion boards here in Arkansas have really gotten involved over the last few years in the export markets, trying to promote Arkansas. Because if you think about it, most of the foreign buyers that are out there, they don't really look, they overlook Arkansas. They go up to the upper Midwest and things like that. They may recognize us. Some would recognize us as a rice state. Most of them don't even realize we grow rice here, even though half the rice in the U.S. is produced here in the state of Arkansas. They'll recognize us for cotton and things like that. But these grains, folks have overlooked Arkansas for a long time on that and trying to change that perspective. Because like we talked about earlier with the on-farm storage and things like that our producers have, they also have direct access to the river. The river system is vital to agriculture. The Arkansas River system, the Mississippi River system, and historically it's been the White River system, unfortunately, because of some issues with the river there, the Corps of Engineers, lack of investment in that area, the lack of dredging and things like that. We've seen our elevators close on that river, and that's going to be a huge blow for the producers in that area, forcing them to travel much longer distances with their commodities. But this export market, being able to get our products to the river system, is vital to agriculture, and it's the quality of grain that we produce here is much better. We'll have a higher protein content for our soybeans. We'll have a higher starch content in our corn. And that flows back to what others have talked about here in the irrigation system. We can control the environment. In 2008, I think it was, when you had this massive drought in the Midwest, we saw the $7, $8 corn prices because the Midwest couldn't produce it because of a drought. Arkansas farmers produced a record crop that year. We had the same weather situation, the same perils that they faced in the Midwest, but our producers that had made that investment in the irrigation had the natural resources to continue to produce these record crops, and it paid off. It cost a lot of money to produce those that year, but producers were able to take advantage of those high prices. And I think that's one of the things we always point out to international buyers when they come in is we're going to be a consistent supplier. It doesn't matter if there's a drought. It doesn't matter what happens. Arkansas farmers are going to have a crop. And the growers that we've had from Columbia and other places, they try to make a purchase in September or October of corn and soybeans because now they realize, hey, there's grain grown in the South. It's not been handled. It's going to be a better quality. We're not going through as many elevators. Just about anything you look at in the elevators or the Federal Grain Inspection Service in Memphis, it's going to be a number 1, which is the highest quality grain that you can get. Now, by the time it gets down the river, it's going to be blended to meet whatever those buyers' specs are, but they recognize we're not going to get the poor quality grain.
Cynthia, most everything that we grow here in Arkansas can be trucked to a river port and exported, and our grain companies do a great job of getting everything loaded and shipped abroad, but that doesn't necessarily bring a lot of year-round employment back to Arkansas. Do you think there are going to be any opportunities for further processing in Arkansas, and what might the job prospects be with that?
I hope so, Ritter. I think there's a lot of potential for that. It's not easy, but we do get, I guess, companies or people interested in that. They see that is lacking here in Arkansas. We used to have more than what we have now, but there's a lot of potential to grow that even more. it's just, it always boils down to, you know, a lack of capital in some instances, but I think there is a lot of potential, and some of that's driven by consumer demand. Their products, you know, the whole new, you know where your food's coming from. There's a big emphasis now by consumers on food safety, and they want to know what's in their food, where it is. And we have had instances where companies are demanding certain type of sustainably grown products or products that are maybe non-GMO. We have producers who can produce those, but to add the value to that, we don't have those facilities here, and that's something that has been looked at, and there is interest. It's just a matter of, I think, getting some of the capital together to move forward with that. And that's something that we've kind of, I think, in the past been pretty, try to fund our own things here in Arkansas. I think we do need to look outside maybe a little bit if we don't have the capital resources here, or the interest to maybe bring some of that into the state, because there's a lot of I think people who recognize how important we are in the whole food production process out there, and I think I think we're poised to really capitalize on that.
That's good news. Freddie, a significant force in almost any industry is consolidation. Do you see that at work in the Arkansas Delta right now with row crop agriculture?
Certainly, everyone's had to get bigger, and it's been hard to do because the way our farm policy has been driven is not to benefit getting bigger, it's to stay smaller. The thought that corporate farming is getting subsidized by the U.S. government has been a huge negative in our farm policy. But we do have to get bigger. One thing I'd like to bring up that is part of that, driving that, is ownership of our farmland. We've got a lot of land in Arkansas that's owned by either endowments or foreign investors or pension plans or whatever it may be. And of course, certainly the rent leaves the state when that happens, but they command a higher rent. And higher farm prices have been driven by lower interest rates and investors chasing a return, where for a long time 6% was an acceptable return on farmland. Now 3% is. So those folks are hard to negotiate rent with, and so you know we're a land of sharecroppers. We're renting land in most cases from somebody, and the pressure now with low commodity prices has made that more problematic. And Cynthia, we need to think about estate taxes again, and helping get farm families a break. With these 5,000 acre farmland prices, it created a state tax problem for a lot of families. Without that being addressed, a lot of that land's going to eventually become owned by someone else, because they'll be forced to sell just to pay the taxes due at someone's death. So, but consolidation gives you efficiencies with the bigger equipment. You cover more acres, it's more timely. But what we talked about earlier with irrigation, and that's where we are at a disadvantage to the Midwest, is it takes a lot of people. If we can get a crop planted in short time, we can spray it in a short period of time, we can fertilize it quickly. But when it comes time to irrigate it, it takes a lot of people and a lot of time. So that's part-time labor you got to scrounge up in June, July, and August to keep your crop alive. There's a lot of expense involved there. The Midwest gets their crop in, the co-op sprays it and fertilizes it, and they're done. And they have, those farmers are working a job in town, so there's more smaller farmers up there because of that.
Andrew, some of our producers are early adopters of technology, and others are followers. Are there any particular technologies that you're seeing producers deploy that most Arkansas producers need to go ahead and get on board with?
Yeah, across the board. I think, as I said earlier, technology is here, and it's present, and those who do not adopt will be left behind. And I think that there are a lot of benefits to the technology that's coming along. And for instance, we have a company this is a kind of a good ag business news story, and based in Little Rock. It's Delta Plastics, that's traditionally been known for its polypipe systems that are delivered to farms, but they have taken a software program that was developed through checkoff dollars and created sort of an Internet of Things software that helps farmers more efficiently utilize water. That's a technology that's present here and should be adopted. It's a money saver, it's a time saver for the landowner, for the farmer. Freddie mentioned that there's a lot of struggles in irrigating. There are other companies that are out there who are, again, in this Internet of Things space, trying to create systems that can manage irrigation, from a remote location and allow you to do some of these things from a distance, and again become more efficient in your irrigation use, save on energy, save on time, and save money. And the good news is that Delta Plastics is a local-based company. Some of these other companies that are furthering these irrigation software systems are also based in Arkansas. It's an exciting time. I hope that we can be more in that innovative space in agriculture and ag business, and figure out a way as a state, as a region, to connect the innovators, the thinkers who can come up with solutions to known problems, and create products and services right here locally that will lead to new businesses, will lead to jobs, and who knows, maybe one day you can create something, probably not the scale of the big companies in Northwest Arkansas, but some pretty significant companies that will be locally based here in Arkansas that will not only be solving these problems locally, but also these problems are applicable in other parts of the ag world around the country and around the world. And we can, this is a thought that I've had this whole time thinking about this conference, is a lot of times we in the Delta get stuck in a mindset of, what can government or policymakers do to help us? And the basic things, I think, are give us the tools we need to develop the resources we have. And Congressman Westerman mentioned all the resources we have. Matt mentioned the value of those resources. We can add value to those things. And I think we as a state need to be thinking more about how important the Delta is. From Central Arkansas to Northwest Arkansas, we're all dependent on one another. Agriculture is a fifth of or more of the state's economy. In order to compete in the U.S. marketplace, in the global marketplace, if we want to compete as a population of 3 million people against cities that have 8 or 10, we have to work together. We cannot isolate ourselves. And so how can we connect those thinkers to the wealthy, the investor class? I think there are a lot of different ways. We just need to work through that. I think maybe, I know that there's a lot of effort going underway now in Little Rock, a lot of the universities. Memphis has some efforts underway on ag innovation, and they're out there trying to find dollars, investors, for people to come in and support local ideas. We may not have the software expertise here currently, but we can provide a problem to the engineers who can create the solutions. So I think that's kind of where we're going. Hopefully we can have some of these develop organically here in the state. And again, like JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you could do for your country. Maybe the Delta can solve not only its own problems, but the problems of the rest of the agricultural economy in the U.S. and internationally, because the population of the world is going to continue to grow. The land acreage is not, and we've got to figure out how to do everything as efficiently and economically as we can.
If I could, Ritter, I wanted to add something to that. I had the privilege of judging the Governor's Cup Business Innovation Award program last week, and on the ag team. They had 7 college teams that developed a product, and they were competing for the awards, and the winners will be announced sometime later this month. But it was very rewarding to see these college kids and the ideas they came up with and the capabilities they had. That we had one team that had a software engineer who's going to work for Google next month. That he was a student here at Hendrix College, I believe, and they had just done phenomenal projects out there, and it was just very exciting and very just rewarding to see the young people we have here and the interest they have in agriculture. They're really kind of fascinated by it, and even though they don't really have a direct connection to the farm, they have kind of discovered it. They think of it as a global issue, as it is, and they are willing to put their, the best and the brightest in their ideas and the technologies. It's just a perfect combination and partnership, and so it's really exciting to see what they're coming up with, and I think we just need to build on that more.
May I add one more thing real quick? The way I like to look at it as far as this technology application goes to hopefully creating new businesses is looking at agriculture on the side of inputs, on the farm landowner side, agronomics, and then the marketing and sales and value-added processing. And all technology is going to change all three of those segments. And we have an opportunity in Arkansas as forward-thinking people, as a nimble group, a small community, to do some things. And a lot of times we depend on the big manufacturers and things of that nature to come about and or government to come fix the problems. But I think we can do a lot if we work together, urban and rural areas, to share struggles and fix problems. And corporations are big, strong corporations that exist in Arkansas started from scratch. They were nothing, but they wouldn't have been what they are today without the idea, the capital, and the energy behind it.
Freddie, I'd like to ask you the last question to wrap up. If there are one or two things that, in your opinion, our elected officials that are here today need to keep in mind regarding the future of agriculture as they develop a vision for their parts of the Delta, what would those things be?
Well, one thing that's always concerning to me, of course, coming from a lending background, is the barriers to entry for a young farmer to get into business. It's so capital intensive. Without what we call family leverage, you can't really get started in farming. Our bank employs a 90-10 program, which is a guarantee program through the FSA that helps highly leveraged farmers get started or helps them out of trouble. So we've employed that program extensively in helping young people get started. But there's a cap to what that guarantee can be. And in today's times, $1 million doesn't farm much land. And so we got to be mindful of that and make sure that we have another generation to come back and farm the land. That's our greatest asset in the Delta is our land, and we've got to have farmers. Without that, we're really in trouble. So I'm concerned about young people coming in. My son, he and I had long discussions about whether he ought to farm or not for a living. And it's interesting, his generation, his friends that grew up in the Delta, I want to come back. They love the lifestyle. They like to hunt and fish and be outdoors. They're hard workers, they're smart kids, but the opportunities for them are limited. And it's all about the capital involved. And you can get out there and work hard and find some land to rent, but can you make it work? And so that's a huge concern for me.
Okay. I think we're running a little bit short on time, so we'll wrap it up there. Panelists, thank you very much. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.